Everybody, this is week 6 of ALEC 241, and here's what you need to do this week. Read part 4, the rest of it, from our book, chapters 39 to 48. And we read the first half of part 4 last week. We're finishing up the second half of part 4 this week. I know we're a little bit behind in the readings because I decided to break that part up. But that's okay. Just keep on going with the chapters there, 39 through 48, and catch up on those few remaining concepts. Some of them we've already talked about in class, but these chapters will help reinforce your understanding of shooting and some of those different concepts. Watch this lecture video. Good job if you're already doing so. I've noticed not many of you are viewing these. I can track views through Canvas and YouTube, and then in your online activities, it becomes really apparent whether you've watched these or not, depending on the quality of your answers. So make sure you're watching these, keeping up with them, because we will not always cover some of this content in class as we start to get busier with the hands-on parts of working on our videos. You also have reflection number 2 due this week on the 20th. The following Tuesday on the 20th. So make sure you keep up with that. It's kind of a light homework week, if you will, but reflection number 2 will cover a couple of things mentioned in this video. So chapters 39 through 48, things that you need to be learning about are the difference between foreground and background. So if you look at this schematic drawing here that I've borrowed from a website, it shows you, think about, just like you do in photography, you can apply foreground and background concepts and middle ground concepts to your video as well. And that's from where you position the iPad, whether you go low, whether you go high, where you position yourself close to something in the foreground. If you just have a flat shot with only stuff in the middle ground and background. The idea is to always kind of try to have something in the foreground and these layers to your shots where something in the foreground catches your eye. It's closer to the frame, it's closer to the iPad, it provides some dimension, and then something in the middle ground, and then something in the background, which is more of the sky, the mountains, the trees, the water, that sort of thing. But I want to show you a quick example of some of this. Even if you just do a Google image search for foreground and background examples, right? You have this dog who's in the foreground. You have the middle ground sort of being the water and the mountains there, and then you have the background sort of being the sky and the Golden Gate Bridge. So same thing here, dog in the foreground catches our eye. We have some middle ground here with the ranchers on their horses, and then we have the further background with the mountains and the sky. So just, look through photos to get some ideas of background, foreground, middle ground, that sort of thing. But then also watch videos this week that start to give you an idea of looking at those different types of shots. I used to go through this phase when I was a video producer where I was always playing around with foreground and background and trying to create cool and interesting interview shots, at least what I thought were. Here you can see I interviewed a scientist about his food science work and bacteria and food, and I staged his lab a little bit, where on the left part of the screen here you see some test tubes in the foreground, and then you see him in the middle ground, and then you see the background of the lab behind him. Now, I thought this was cool back in the day, and maybe it was or wasn't, but these are some things you can do to play with the different levels and depths of your interview shots as well. But as you can see, this one kind of backfired a little bit. The test tubes are more in focus than the actual scientist is. He's a bit blurry. So you can tell I'm learning here. I would say definitely make sure your scientist or whoever is speaking is in focus, and try not to let the foreground become too distracting or be what's actually in focus. So in hindsight, I probably would have moved closer to him, zoomed to him a little bit, and not had as much of a prominent foreground here because it's somewhat distracting from him in the message. But these are some fun things to play around with when you're framing your shot. It doesn't have to just be an interview shot. It can also be shots for your video. B-roll. I noticed some of you in your online activities from last week, you were already playing with foreground and background. You know, the person who had the shot of reaching into the refrigerator case to get the ice cream was playing with foreground and background, the hand coming in into the foreground and coming back out to the background, that sort of thing. So you can also do it with your B-roll. That's also a great example of playing with angles. The book talks about playing with angles, right? So going up, going down, shooting on the ground, shooting from above, shooting from the left, shooting from the right, playing around with angles on your one side of the 180-degree line to give us some interest. Because in real life, we don't walk around and move our body like this to look at things. But you can do it with the camera to give depth and interest to your video. This chapter also has a reminder of the rule of thirds. Gives you an example of not to frame things dead center of your screen, but to position them in one of the thirds to give interest to the way things look. Again, you can break up all kinds of shots into the rule of thirds, right? So what did I have going on here? I have him sort of to the right third of the screen, not dead center. Have some interest on this left third of the screen as well. And you can break up any of these background and foreground shots into the rule of thirds as well to get an idea of how you would like to look at them. So, you know, just something to keep thinking about as you're shooting. How are you breaking your interviews up into the rule of thirds, but also your B-roll shots? So just read through that chapter for a little bit more of a reminder. Then he also gives some practical tips about how do you problem solve when you're in the middle of a video shoot and things aren't going quite right. Maybe the person isn't saying the sound bites the way you're hoping they'll come out, or they're tripping over words, or they're just not doing very well with a question that you're asking them and you need to move on to a different question, or maybe you're not getting the wide, medium, close-up shots you want, and the experiment you're shooting video of, or the animal you're shooting video of, whatever it might be, is not quite going right. So it talks about how do you just let certain things go? How do you try to redo certain things? How do you know when enough is enough and to stop shooting that particular thing? And then also it talks about having a little bit of luck. So sometimes you need to be open-minded on your video shoot as well. You're going in with a shot list, you're going in with your interview questions, you're really focused on what you're trying to get and need, but sometimes a little bit of luck. You know, an animal might do something at a certain second that you weren't anticipating. A person might say something much better than you had expected them to say. Someone else might have an idea of, hey, while you're in the lab, would you also like to show X? Or while we're out at this field site, would you also like to shoot Y? Go along with those things and incorporate them into your shoots and be flexible. Be able to problem solve when things aren't going well, but then also be able to go with the flow and be open-minded and get to know your people and take their suggestions into what you're shooting. And a little bit of luck might happen. You never know. The chapters also talk about microphones and what are the different types of microphones. It talks about the big boom microphones you see like on movie sets where a person's holding a microphone on a pole over the top of people and capturing that sound that way. But just pay attention to your microphone placement. In class, we've talked about how to use the lavaliers and hiding the cord under the clothing, having it below their mouth, having the windscreen on it. Also for your Facebook Lives, using the handheld microphones, holding them under your mouth, speaking across the top of them. Never hold a microphone directly at your mouth and speak into it loudly or you'll blow out the sound. It talks about multiple cameras. So we won't necessarily use multiple cameras in this class, except for our behind the scenes shoot. We are going to play around with an app called Switcher Pro, where you can have one iPad Bluetooth to other iPads and you can switch between the iPads. That's what we do for our electronic field trips. So if you're looking for an example of that, we will talk about that in class towards the after spring break part of the semester, and we will play around with using multiple iPads to shoot your behind the scenes interviews with each other, which will be a lot of fun. It also talks about know when to wrap on a shoot. Don't just keep dragging it out, hoping the shot will get better. Don't just keep sort of wasting the scientists and staff time at the different sites you're at, just shooting and shooting and shooting. At some point, you have to realize you've reached saturation. You have enough footage. Nothing's really going to get any better from here. And know when it's a good time to stop the video shoot and call it good, and know that you have what you need to be able to put a decent story together. All right, the other thing I want you to learn about this week, I have some links in Canvas for you to read related to search engine optimization. Now, this is the algorithm, the behind the scenes technical stuff that Google uses, or Bing, or pick your search engine, uses to have sites come to the top, to be on that first screen. When you Google streaming science, how do we get our streaming science project to show up as one of the top 3 to 5 sites on that very first screen of search results? So this has a lot to do with how we build text into the site. What are the terms people are going to be using to find us? STEM, science, literacy, agriculture, environment, college, middle school, high school, scientists. What are the types of images we should be showing that Google will find? What are the types of text we should be using? How do people find us? Who's going to find us? And consider how this affects our videos. So the videos are the content built into our streaming science website. So if we're hoping Google finds us and finds our videos for people to watch and use in schools, or however they might be used with 4-H groups, things like that, we need to know when we write our YouTube description for our videos. If you'll notice later in class at the end of the semester, you need to have a title, a description, and keywords for your video. So what will it take for YouTube to find your video, which then helps Google find our website for streaming science? So start thinking about what are keywords you would use. We would probably use things related to corn because of the corn board, related to science literacy because of our science literacy videos, things related to the University of Nebraska Lincoln, IANR, Kasner. Think of all the potential keywords people will use to find you. Your name, streaming science, STEM, all of those sorts of things. And know the difference between some of these search engine optimization terms. If you're ever going to work in marketing or sales, or being a communication specialist for a nonprofit or a company or things like that, you'll want to know about search engine optimization and how to get people to stumble upon your website for further information. So things like you can sell ads on Facebook, Twitter, all of that sort of thing, but you can also do it organically through some of these search engine terms and metadata you put with your photos. What is the difference between a page view and a visitor? A page view, someone maybe viewed a certain page on your site, but they didn't stay there very long. They just kind of stumbled across it. They found it quickly. So those are kind of quick numbers that show quickly who's coming to a site. Visitors are typically someone who stays on a page for a couple of minutes. They actually do some scrolling around. They might click on something. They spend a little bit of time there to become a visitor. Unique visitors are people from outside of your country, outside of your state, outside of your typical type of web traffic that you do have to that site. So they might become a unique visitor in how they're categorized in this stuff. Time spent on site is an important metric when it comes to search engine optimization. How long was someone there? Did they click on your content? Did they watch your video? Did they just bounce right off of it? So bounce rate is someone who came, maybe didn't mean to come to your site and they bounced off, or they came to your site and they found a link on it to something else they actually wanted and they bounced off. All of these terms are important to understand when it comes to setting up things like Hootsuite for social media or Sprout Social, things like Google Analytics. If you're ever going to be in charge of a company's web presence, Google Analytics is a great tool to embed on your websites to track all of this stuff. WordPress gives you some of these analytics about your site, but I just want you to be aware of what search engine optimization is. Why should we care about it as mobile video producers who are putting content on YouTube and on a streamingscience.com page? And be aware of how we can get a little bit more search engine traffic to our videos and our site. So this is not due now, this is due at the end of the semester, but I just want you to start thinking about it. You're going to have to turn in a YouTube title, description, and keywords for your video, and I would really recommend that you find Streaming Science on streamingscience.com, go to the videos, and then I would really recommend that you go to look at some of the past videos on YouTube to see what your past students wrote. As you can see there, they have a title, The Science of Plant Breeding and Genetics, Graduate Student Scientist Profile. This was a series we did of grad student profiles, so that was the subtitle that was used. They describe the scientist in the video, who she is, where she's from, what she's researching, and then afterwards I also have you always include this paragraph about what streaming science is, as well as your name and that you're the producer of the video, what streaming science is, and then we can include links to relevant sites like the Corn Board, or mention that this is in partnership with the Corn Board, that sort of thing. The category we often choose for our videos is education, because we're creating these as college students at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And then keywords are behind the scenes that our person will incorporate, so things that have to do with the topic: corn, ethanol, science, scientists, STEM careers, streaming science, that sort of thing. So you can see this video, all the videos you create will live on the University of Nebraska-Lincoln YouTube channel in a streaming science playlist, and then from there I embed and share them in the streaming science website. So you'll have your video embedded in the site, then we also use your YouTube description that you write here. So it tells us who the scientist is in the video, what she's doing. It tells us who produced the video. And then if you notice here, you're also going to be required to take a selfie with your scientist. So when you go on your video shoot, either before the video shoot or after the video shoot, when you know the person a little bit better, ask to take a selfie with them. And that will be what we use as the thumbnail for a lot of our posts that go with this video, so people know who the student is and who the scientist is. Also, we use it for when we share it with IANR News Now and things like that. You'll see here on our behind the scenes page, which still is a little rough, but we're getting it going. We have all the selfies with scientists that have been taken from past projects. Not all of them, but some of them are here. So think of something interesting with a unique background that you might be able to put behind you and your scientist to let us know who you are and who they are, and then make sure that's sort of a thumbnail photo that we'll be able to use to share your project with the world on streamingscience.com. So just something to think about. So when you're on your video shoot, don't forget to also take the selfie. And then also always be thinking, what are the ways we're going to have people search and find these videos through these different search engine optimization keywords and things like that. All right, again, this week, we're actually in week 6 here. Read part 4, the rest of these chapters. You're watching this video, great job. And do reflection number 2 by the 20th. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you guys have a great week 6.